Hello, Dragon Ball Super family. I'm Legends Michael Carrick of Team Foe X PPG, and if you're here, you're probably looking forward to the Invoker deck I piloted to a top 8 finish day 1 and an X1-1 finish day 2 at this weekend's GenCon regionals. Over the course of both days, my two ties were to Eon Hill piloting Sen Shenron, and my losses were to Red Jiren by Juha Bach and Gogeta Xeno by Brandon Corpus. Let's leap right into this post-catastrophe banlist deck profile. Son Goku as a leader from set 9 with the Sun Ultra Instinct Son Goku limit surpassed. It's the blue red surge leader that allows you to activate battle once per battle, discard an extra card, take up to one of your life, and then draw a card, and this leader will gain 5k for the battle, effectively turning your extra cards into combo power. As a result, this allows us to play a very different game of Dragon Ball Super than all of our opponents. We play 36 extra cards and only 14 battle cards, ensuring that we have an extra card every time we need to cycle on our front side. His Awakened Surge ability allows us to tuck one red and one blue card underneath this card. Then we can draw 3 cards and untap up to 1 energy and flip them over. On the backside, if you have 5 or less life, as long as you control a U7 card, you can draw a card, take a peek at your opponent's hand, and then discard 1 card from there that is a battle card of 35k power or less, or is an extra card. Alternatively, you can add up to 3 different multicolor extra cards from your hand or from your drop and or warp to your hand. Very simple leader. You definitely want to stay on the front side as long as you can, especially in the slower format, which is why this format is so great for this leader. Unless you run into Gogeta Xeno, you're likely going to be able to stay unawakened until your kill turn, which gives you an incredible uh, like 1 extra energy on turn 5, which a lot of decks just can't afford to do. A lot of decks want to awaken so much earlier so they can burn that energy. So you get a whopping 6 energy without any beans on your turn 5, allowing for some really neat kills. And I'll go over some of these kill combos later. But point is, you want to stay on your front side for as long as you can. Try to draw throughout your deck. So the deck still plays a full suite of Tournament of Power Arena. It's just a field card that has a permanent if your leader card is a Universe 7 card. Negate the energy exhaust of all your red-blue multicolor cards in all areas. Really cool because once you have your top down in turn 1, you can charge all your red-blues for free without having to tap them. Then it has its Activate main, which allows you to look at the top 3 cards of your deck, up to the top 3 cards of your deck, and then replace them either in the top of your deck or the bottom of your deck in any order. For a lot of new Invoker players, learning when to move those cards to the bottom of the deck and selecting the order of those cards actually will matter throughout the course of the game. If you bottom deck up to 4 times in a game, you're going to see that top card by the time you get to your kill turn. So it's very important for you as an Invoker player to learn how to utilize the bottom of the deck. It's effectively drawing 3, especially if you like want to avoid drawing stuff like tops or like extra violent rays or any dead cards that won't really apply to the situation. So of course in our mulligan we're looking for a Tournament Power Arena. Ideally you want to find a Tournament Power Arena and then a blue card to play it on turn 1. If you don't have these, regardless of the matchup, especially in this format, regardless of the matchup, you're probably going to throw away your whole hand with the only uh, possibility or exception to that rule being Gogeta Xeno, where you want to find an instinctive reprisal instead. And then moving on to what I call our fetch spells. All these, I call them fetch spells because they all have the activate main at the bottom where you can warp it from your drop area. And then check the top card of your deck. If it's a multicolor extra card, you can add it to your hand. So obviously we have the Emperor's Death Beam suite, which allows us to activate main or battle, reduce a battle card's power, ignoring barrier by 30k. Really powerful card, preventing your opponents from killing you by battle cards. We play 4 copies of Royal Condemnation, which is a counter play. If the opponent's battle card is a 8-drop or less is trying to come into play, you can send it to the bottom of the deck instead. This fortunately affects most SCRs in the game, to include the Kai SCR, both Kai SCRs, the Supreme Kai time and the new Kibito Kai Absorbed SCR. Although it still does prevent you from attacking for the rest of the turn, it does remove the possibility of a 20k or 40k double strike coming onto the field. So really cool applications with this card. You can also affect that Gogeta Xeno card that black decks like to play. All of them except for the new 10 drop that just came out from Prism. And of course, it's one of our fetch cards. And then our new fetch card added to the family is 4 copies of Explosive Demon Wave. With the limiting and errata on Catastrophic Blow, we can no longer kill somebody from such high life levels through Catastrophic Blow. So I elected not to play any copies this event because I figured people would still be playing around it, and I was right. People kept trying to stay at high life totals. that way they couldn't get cat blow to death, and then they'd still play out their hand, and so of course they just died to the new strategy instead. So Explosive Demon Wave, in addition to being a fetch card, has this counter ability if your leader card is red, and you choose one red card in your hand and discard it as part of cost for playing this card. Negate the battle card's counter attack skill, then switch up to one of your blue energy to active mode at the end of the turn. So it's really cool. You get to counter any battle card negate. So Topo, Hatchiyak, Bupo, Oceanus, even the Kai negate in black. You keep naming it, Mecha Riposte. All these floodgate negates that people want to like maintain in our battle cards later, they keep in their deck and could stop your win con. You can just negate them. So it's really cool to have this like easily accessible answer to those cards. And of course, discarding a red card is easy for this deck because you play a bunch of these red blue cards. I've completely forgot that this card even untaps an energy at the end of your turn on the turns I've used it, because usually by the time you're using this card, your opponent is dead. But however, if you do get to a situation where your opponent has an extra negate and you do have to pass a turn, the untap energy does come into play often. And I myself I need more practice with this card myself. Moving on to our tech red-blue multicolor extra cards, we have 3 copies of Instinctive Reprisal. In the past, Instinctive Reprisal was one of the worst cards in this deck, and even in this format, Instinctive Reprisal is probably still one of the worst cards of this deck. But this deck, the only counter deck out there right now, in a popular counter deck, sorry, out there in this format is Gogeta Xeno, and Instinctive Reprisal does helps us just take on that deck at more even speed because they can play the two or the two like True Fighting Spirits, Goku and Vegeta, and you can just instinctive on their first attack to remove both of them off the field. That way you can play whichever if they just had the Goku, you can continue to play through the Goku in the following turns. If they had the Vegeta, you can now untap later that turn and so forth. This also has some application versus the Piccolo Jr. red-green card when they have like a Nappa or a Trunks helping blast on the field and then they swing with the Piccolo. You can instinctive reprisal and you can take out the Nappa and the Trunks or Nappa and or the Trunks. That way they have nothing to alliance with. And now their Piccolo did nothing. The attack is negated, and they got nothing to alliance. It's actually a really effective card versus those matchups. And then in the matchups where it's not that great, it's still a 2 mana negate or a 1 mana negate under Invoker, which of course can hinder some leader swings because it can reduce the leader by 10k. And additionally, it's a red-blue multicolor extra card, so it can help you filter through your deck a lot faster. And you can of course always charge it versus those matchups. Additionally, it being an extra card allows to further our win con later in the game. We still only do play 2 copies of Sleepy Boy Technique. This card still is very difficult to resolve over the course of the game, even more so in a control game, because a lot of people are playing ways to counter. Blue can always play counter, so you can't rely on this card anymore. And the decks that do poop out a lot of battle cards, this card doesn't really affect. You don't really want to return thwarting to your opponent's hand, so a lot of times it's just a negate attack, draw 2 cards. It doesn't really get that much value other than that. And even though like that's like not that bad, we can't afford to really resolve it more than once because even though it's a slower format, we really are still playing Vegeta on turn 4, and then you really only get to resolve one of these. And then if you're lucky, you get the D magic into a second. And if you desperately need a third, you use your leader's backside effect to pick it up. And then the really like techie choices, we have the 1 copy of We're in This Together. It versus these mid-range decks, this card just absolutely blows them out. You have time to set up your Vegeta, you have time to pick this up and then blow out their field and have to reset up their field into your like swarm of negates so they can't really get through. And then more importantly, of course, with Cell Surge being so popular in this format, We're in This Together absolutely shuts out that matchup. You just constantly keep discarding this card and paying a red to pick it up. It's effectively the same as paying an energy to draw a card versus that deck, except you really don't use your energy for anything else, so Cell Surge is a really easy matchup for this deck. Not to mention all their other discard out or all the other extra discard chances they fire at you, you can just discard your fetch spells and then those replace themselves. So you really never run out of a hand. And even though they don't attack you, you can attack your opponent and you can just take your own life with your leader effect. So this is another reason why I thought this deck was so great for this format. We have combination attack. I actually used this card 0 times this weekend. Mid-range decks are either playing cards that are too high for this or playing cards that are too efficient for you to want to play this. And by that I mean like Goku Calamity Challenger draws a card when it's played. Tapion Calamity Challenger draws a card when it's played. Bardock Raiders Warcry draws a card when it's being played. So you don't really want to be returning cards back to your opponent's hand. The real reason we really play this card is because I was afraid of Demigra this weekend. Also, if your opponent does feel like they can go in on turn 2 because you baited them and took your own life down to 2, then you can just snap this card off of a reset after they've dumped their whole hand. So just having access to this card really prevents your opponent from ever really going all in, whether you're at 2 or 3 mana up. And then because we are a much slower format, we have blue decks running around, we have Cell Surge running around, and we have Kid Icarus running around. Decks that we don't want to attack, but we still want to do stuff with their mana and do stuff on our turn. We play one copies of Tyranny's Cost. Every deck in this game right now is drawing a billion cards on their turn. They have like 12 to 20 card hands by the time they go to turn 3. So Tyranny's Cost will get value in this game, especially if you're going second. You'll get to on your turn 3 you get to slam down Tyranny's Cost for 2. Your opponent will lose 5 cards from their hand and you'll draw 2 cards. And if you're any good at math, you'll realize that that's an incredible advantage throughout the course of the game. It's just a simple red blue 2 mana draw 2 cards. If your opponent has 10 or more cards, they shuffle cards from their hand back into their deck until they have 10 left. It's a great card. We actually play another one in the side, and because it's red blue and an extra card, we can use it to filter through our deck even more. Of course, we only play one copy because you probably can't resolve a second one. The only world where you do is if you raw play it on 3 and then you play Vegeta on 4 and then slam this down. But then you're tapped out on 4 going to your opponent's turn, so that's kind of silly. But if you find yourself with just like a cornucopia of energy available, you can use your leader effect to pick this back up and draw into a win. Also, this is very effective during our win turn. Usually we have 2 extra energy up during our win comp, and then we can just slam Tyranny's Cost as an extra way to draw more cards and put this in the drop. A lot of the defense in this deck still revolves around playing untapping your energy. So we play the full suite of beans. I know it's not an aggro format, so you're like, why would you play beans? You gain 5k. Well, now bean is part of our kill combo a lot of times, especially if you want to guarantee your kill combo. Bean is the perfect way to do that. I'll talk about this some more when we get closer to our kill combo. But just the ability to untap gives you access to more mana to win the game. But if you can avoid untapping with Bean throughout the game, your kill turn becomes even more deadly. Speaking of untapping, we play the full suite of Beerus Divine Obliterators. This card is a blue-red, just untap on your opponent's turn if you defensively combo it. It's 0 for 10k. It is your super combo, and it is a U7, which actually comes up now more than ever, especially with all these decks having some way to remove a barrier card. It's very unlikely for Vegeta to reach turn 5 alive, so when you go to turn 5 with a clear board, you can cast Divine Beerus or Beerus Divine Obliterator for 2. Your opponent either Super Kamehameha this, which burns the Kamehameha, or there's a Masu this, or you get to look at their hand and then rip out whatever the answer is to your Rival Seeker. Now you can play Rival Seeker with your remaining 3 energy. The only other card I would consider in the super combo slot is like 2 copies of this and 2 copies of that Goku. That's like a Universe 7 draw 1 combo. That's kind of cool too. Because he also is Universe 7, and of course he's a 2-drop, so you can slam him on the field. And he lets you get a bit more draw on the deck, which sometimes matters. But there were many games this weekend where I was down to like 1 or 2 cards left in my deck by the time I killed my opponent. And granted, that's by my own volition because almost every card in this deck like draws to replace itself, especially through your leader. Like Tyranny's Cost draws 2, and your leader is just drawing 3 to 4 cards every turn on both players' turns, so you will fly through your deck. And then, of course, we have our trusty negate. We play Dimension Magic. It's just negate the attack, draw 2, or untap 2, which allows you, of course, to utilize your Invoker spells. If you have Vegeta develop in the field, you have access to Dimension Magics in your hand, you pretty much won the game. However, don't be afraid to cycle your Dimension Magics, as oftentimes they're effectively the same as just like cycling an attack to get out of cycling a D Magic to get it out of attack is effectively the same as using a D Magic throughout the course of the game. That's a judgment call you're going to have to make throughout the game because you almost never want to miss an attack of cycling. So like when they attack your opponent, regardless of what's in your hand, you want to cycle something, or else your deck is just not going to do what it does. Unless, of course, you just have all your win cons in your hand and you have the perfect hand setup, but that's really unlikely, and at the point where you would have to decide to cycle your D Magics. And then going into our one floodgate that we chose to employ for this event, we chose triple Violent Rays. I've gone back and forth on Topo or Violent Rays multiple times in theory crafting, and ultimately I fell on Violent Rays because 1, it's an extra card, and 2, it only costs 1 mana. And and additionally it truly shuts out the turn. So like all these decks are playing like Tapion Calamity Charger, the Boo Unison, even the Broly Unison from Cell Surge, or just multiple Apes, or the Trunks Unison and Kid Icarus. Point is, there's a lot of 20ks and higher in this game, and if you slam Violent Rays, you also shut out Fighting Against Fate as a finisher, which is a really good feeling. But more important than what Violent Rays can do for you, I want to talk about what Topo can't do for you, or rather why Topo was not my choice. Because we're in such a blue heavy format, and control heavy format, there's going to be tons of Koitsekais and tons of Brawly Crowns or Retributions in people's side decks, and even in their main decks. So if you leave 2 mana up for Topo, people just slam Broly and they rip out your Topo, and now you're just stuck without any kind of floodgate defense going to your opponent's turn. Plus, it's a battle card, so if you draw it like too early, it does nothing. You can't even cycle it, and it's bad matchups. So Violent Rays was definitely still the way to go, and Violent Rays still felt great this weekend. We still play 3 copies of Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta Inspired Technique. With it being a much slower format, it is much safer to just slam Vegeta on 3, but we still don't want to play more than 3 Vegetas because this card is still probably one of the worst cards in the deck, ironically. It gives us Invoker, and that's all it does. It's a straight neg when you play it. A lot of times I'll just attack with this card to clear a Unison, to clear a battle card, and if my opponent attacks this card, with one of their battle card, I'll negate their leader attack when they attack this with their leader, and then if they attack this as a battle card, this has become a 3 energy double negate at this point, because now my leader's not under any pressure. You say, yeah, but you don't get to cycle, but by the time you slam Vegeta and are willing to attack with them, you don't really need to cycle on your opponent's turn anymore. And they know that if they try to attack Vegeta with a battle card, you can always Senzu Bean slash Beerus super combo into Death Beam, losing them that attack, and then if Vegeta lasts an entire turn until your turn 4, the game's very difficult for your opponent to win still. Moving into our WinCon, we play 4 copies of Son Goku Rival Seeker. Son Goku Rival Seeker this weekend. Plenty of times where I just landed him on 5 since the format's so slow, and I just activated main to grab 2 extra cards and then played nothing on top of him. That way I go into 6 with all 6 mana up and Rival Seeker still in the field. Your opponent wasn't able to clear him because you have a swath of extra cards that prevent your opponents from going to the combo step or to prevent them from playing any actual non-extra card based removal. So Rival Seeker super safe right now to play, and of course it goes into our finishing piece, our Son Goku Instinct Surpass. For those in the past who played just the Catastrophic Blow version, the Dash Pack Goku is now back and in fashion. It's a triple strike deflect energy exhaust 6-drop that can be played off of Son Goku Rival Seeker, of course. It's got this activate main. Choose 2 red-blue multicolored extra cards from your hand and or your drop area and warp them. And then you choose up to one of your opponent's leader cards, reduce that leader card by power by 5k for the duration of the turn, and then you switch this card to active mode. That is not a once per turn. Oftentimes when we go into our kill turn, this is 9 or 10 times this card gets to attack, and your opponent's at -15 by the time it's getting off its 6 attack. You don't even have to combo when you attack with this. And since you have Explosive Demon Wave to shut out floodgates, you don't have to worry about floodgates. The only thing you're really worried about is stuff like Petrification, and Nimbus and Violent Rays. Those are the only cards I can really think of that I worry about. But that's what your leader is for. Over the course of 2 turns, since the format's so slow, you can just look at your opponent's hand twice, take away those answers, and now your opponent's stuck with what they have left. And then, regardless of how much combo power they have or how many negates they have, it's never going to be enough to get past this guy. As long as you're playing the deck correctly, you'll have at least minimum 5 or 6 attacks with this guy. And then if you choose to, you can add super combos, or you can just let them survive. If they survive and they burn their whole hand to survive, you just pass, and now they pass back to you, and you swing again, and you do a bunch of shenanigans again with them. So it's actually a very difficult card to beat. Of course, you're thinking, well, we can just beat him with the Boo Unison, how do you get past that in blue, or how do you get past Heroine's Lineage. Yes, we are susceptible to those cards now that we play a battle card finisher. So of course we teched in 1 copies of Strategies of Universe 7. We only play 1 copy because versus those decks, you'll have to keep it in the mulligan, or if you find it early, you just keep it and you hold on to it as part of a mini SCR. And versus the decks that it's not good, like black, yellow, green, literally any color that's not blue, or that would play Heroine's Lineage. If you know they play Heroine's Lineage, then if you can assume or see that they play Heroine's Lineage, then you'll keep this card. Otherwise, because you're going to look at your opponent's hand right before you really make that decision. And then you can use this to play onto your Goku so it gains barrier, so it can't be cleared by the Boo Unison, and can't be cleared by Heroine's Lineage. And it lets you ignore the Kai negate that black has that would warp your Goku otherwise. But you could also just counter that card and it doesn't become a problem. But yeah, and then of course we have our Apex Power. This card often I have yet to actually I think I won 1 game by attacking with this card this weekend. Most of the time though, since this format's so slow, we can just go to turn 5, slam this bad boy down on 5, swing with our leader / just raw awaken with our leader, look at our opponent's hand and take out any kind of answer they need. Swing with our leader, double beam up so we go back to 3 energy, slam down Rival Seeker, go into the Infinite Attacker, and then we can like poke to get rid of their first negate or however you want to do it. You're kind of just baiting out a single negate with this card or baiting out petrification awkwardly enough, and then you can use your actual finisher to finish out the game. And since they're under the effects of this, you don't even have to worry about floodgates. You don't have to worry about super combos. Your opponent is definitely dead. There's other worlds where like you resolve Son Goku Instinct Surpass on 5. You just put a strategy universe 7 on him, and you don't really do anything with it. And then on 6, you slam down Apex, and they're like just as dead as they were if you did it the other way around. So the deck definitely still has a a one-shot kill mechanic on turn 5, which is great because that is the ultimate reward of being able to survive for 5 turns. Especially in a format where there's it's such a skill intensive format and fun format to play because everybody is stringing together these strategies in their head. So I hope you enjoyed this deck. Oh, I should go into side deck before I do my closeout. My bad. So this was just my side deck for day 1. My side deck for day 2 had 2 cards changed. Um, this is strictly just a deck profile for day 1, really, Invoker. Day 2 I changed the deck a little to match what I saw from day 1. But we have the extra copy of Tyranny's Cost for hand control and slower matchups, of course, and just those decks that draw billion cards, so Kid Icarus, Soul Striker, Hatchiak, just stuff that really relies on their hand or that you really don't have to do anything into. We have another copy of Wearing This Together to really cement our win versus hand control. You really don't side this in versus anything that builds a board because you versus those decks you're going to likely have won game 1 and then game 2 it's not like you're going to be able to resolve Vegeta and play this card in the same turn because they're going to have sided cards that either remove Vegeta or they're just not going to play into it or they're going to be faster decks rather, so you're not going to have time to resolve the second copy, and a second copy really can mean death versus those decks. So this second copy truly is just for hand control. We have a second copy of Strategies of Universe 7 versus those blue decks, and those decks that can remove our attacker on its kill turn. We have one copy of Jiren Survival of the Fittest. That way, when we play into blue, we don't even have to rip Android 17 out of their hand anymore. We can just walk right into it. If the game versus blue goes to 12 energy, you've either messed up somehow or you've already won the game on 11. So you don't have to worry about Android plus baby. Of course, if they have the baby -5, then you don't want to let the game, like if they're playing the parasitic unison, then you don't want the game to get to 7. And a lot of times you can beat blue. Blue is a pretty free color for this deck. It's fairly difficult for blue to win versus this deck because Hatchiak does nothing, right? Because now we can counter it, and even God Sealing is not enough. Plus, like Zamasu God Sealing is not enough. Um, Something to keep in mind. Plus, that Goku has deflect, so you can just wait till turn 6, slam the Goku on 6, and then awaken. So you have the 1 mana for the counter, and then you just swing with the Goku. So they can't even God Sealing it. Nor can they even Zamasu it. So like chances are they're not getting to 7, but if they do, you want this as a backup. I actually never resolved this card this weekend, despite all the blue decks I played against. So maybe in further testing, I'll take this card out, and it's just a free side out versus blue. But I'm sure blue will come up with something. Like the point of this game is to evolve over each other, right? So I'll keep it in until I see otherwise. We kept 2 Beerus Balls, knowing that we'd be playing against King Cold, Green Gotenks, Cell Surge. We want to be able to beat out Frieza Charismatic Villain. Our 6-drop does have deflect, but he absolutely does not have a barrier. So Charismatic still kills him, but we just keep Beerus Ball in and we beat out Charismatic, and that matchup's really easy. Play 2 copies of Super Saiyan Son Goku Kaioken Concentrated Destruction. If you're going second versus like one of these faster decks, this is a great card to bring in. Instead of slamming Vegeta on 3, you can slam Kaioken on 3. And now in case you have to awaken, you still have a U7 on the field and you reduce their field to shreds. It also lets you bypass that Lord Slug that yellow has and Son Goku Absolute Annihilator that yellow has. It's a great card for those effects. It's also just a red card, so you can awaken with it. So it just has great synergy with the deck. Being a red leader, we do play 2 copies of Broly Crown of Retribution. Since the Zamasu the Eliminator is running rampant this format, we can just use it on turns 3 and 4, and even on 5 now that we don't need all of our energy to kill our opponent, to just look at our opponent's hand and either force out Zamasu or just rip out Zamasu. And of course, versus blue, this lets us take out God Sealing techniques. So super great card to play against. I only play 2 because you can't really resolve it any earlier than that. Like you really aren't going to resolve generally more than 1 a game, realistically. Because on turn 4, you might need to keep up some of the mana to survive. You probably had just slammed Vegeta. So there's some kind of like give and take when playing multiple copies of this card. And then versus Gogeta Xeno and Red Green Low to the Ground strategies, we play two copies of Supreme Kai, Time Disruptor. Especially versus Gogeta Xeno, a lot of their one drops get under Violent Rays, so between Violent Rays and this card, you can just flood out the entire, lock them out for an entire turn. Especially on turn 4, if you can slam this the first time they play something and then Violent Rays the next attack or the first attack, like their turn is effectively over beyond their unison and the leader, which you should have a few other negates for, and then you go into turn 5 pretty cleanly to end the game out. Really great card for that. The only qualm with this card is black, so it doesn't synergize with your deck at all. But it does get around Super Kamehameha in that if they Kamehameha this card, you can still prevent them from attacking with one drops. The only thing you lose out on is the draw card, and it is one of those black side deck cards that has a 5k combo power, so you can combo it off on your leader to make him a brief 20k defensive card, which is really cool too. Play one copy of Clash of the Masked Warrior for King Cold, or any strategy really that goes all in on their unison, even versus Gogeta Xeno. Because if they're playing the mirror list, especially with the amount of ways that we can manipulate our energy to untap during mid combat, we can just play this card to completely snuff out and all in on the unison, and it really creates a mind game going into game 3 if they've seen this card in game 2, because now they don't want to go all in on a unison. But the flip side is going all in on a unison is one of the only two ways you can really kill this deck. So, really great card to have in your side deck versus these unison-based strategies, especially if you run into stuff like Vegito or VJX that really use their unisons to finish you off. And then we play two copies of Sun Gohan and pick Skill Sharpen, which lets you deal with the one drop, the two Shining Spirits from Gogeta Xeno, or any like really black text that puts them out there. It also lets you deal with Piccolo Jr. in the early game, but I wouldn't recommend siding this in versus anything else. I sided in versus Jiren mistakenly game 2 and 3 until I realized that this card is really only good if you see it on the opening hand versus Jiren. After that, it's actually just a terrible card because it's just blue, so you can really only awaken with it. You can't charge it, you can't really do anything else with it, you can't cycle it, so it has literally no other synergy. It's never playable, never replaces itself. I actually hate this card. I've hated it for the entire year that I've tried playing it, and so it'll probably come back out of my side deck. But that is the complete deck profile for this deck. I hope you enjoyed it. Shout out to my teammates that came out to GenCon. Had a really good time chilling with them and like really spending in real life tournament time with my friends. GenCon was a blast. It was my first con, so I learned a lot. I played a lot of games, had a lot of fun, and I hope to see all of you guys at the next in-person event.